Hi everyone, welcome to today's stream. Today what we're doing is we're working with the Humanitarian Toolbox on a live streaming event, and we're just waiting for Jeff Fritz to wrap up his portion of the stream. Jeff has been working on the admin app and updating. Um, I guess back up a second. We're working on an app called TwoWeeksReady, which is a project for the Humanitarian Toolbox, and this is a project that I've streamed about a few times. And the idea with this app is that it helps families to make sure that they're ready in case of emergencies and disasters that might strike in their area. And it allows them to do things like come up with a family plan, make sure that it's really easy to share that plan with the rest of your family. So having an emergency plan of these are the steps we need to do in case of, say, an earthquake or a tsunami. This is our plan for getting back together, how we reunite, and then also helping families to build and keep track of emergency kits. So the kits that contain all those things that you need in case of emergency, things like water and prescription drugs and food and all those emergency supplies that you would want to have ready in an emergency kit for your home, and also in a bag that you can take and go with you in case you need to leave your home in a hurry. So that's the project we're working on. As I said, Jeff Fritz has been working on updating this project to .NET 6. The admin app of this project, there's a few different parts to this application. There's an admin app that would be used by the disaster response professionals, the people who do this for a job, in doing things like defining what a base kit looks like, what you should have in your emergency kit, and defining the information about what types of hazards exist in your area. Things like when there's an earthquake, what should you do? What should you do to be prepared for an earthquake? What should you do during an earthquake? What should you do after an earthquake? That type of thing that they would do is managed through this admin app. And then there's a client app that's built using Vue.js. It's a progressive web application, and that's the application that actual users, like just regular people, would use to help build up those family plans and those emergency kits. So Jeff is working on that admin app, and I expect we'll have a pull request that we can have a look at shortly. So as I said, he's updating that admin app over to .NET 6. It was on .NET 5. There's a couple of things that I want to focus on my stream today. One of those is updating the we're going to update there's a backend API for the app that's built in Azure Functions. That's currently built using .NET 3.1. We'd like to also get that onto .NET 6 just so that all our .NET versions are aligned for the various parts of the app. And then the next part that I'd like to do, if we can successfully get through that during the stream today, is take a look at running our end-to-end tests. So we have some end-to-end tests that are written to do some very basic checks on accessibility for the application. I'd like to see if we could write maybe a couple more tests and see if we can get those running in a GitHub action so that when we do check in our code with pull requests, that it can actually spin up a local version of the app within GitHub Actions and run through those end-to-end tests so that we get that feedback with our pull requests of whether or not we've broken some existing functionality, for example. So we'll see how far we get, and I'm just going to get started on the .NET upgrade here for the API. So if you're interested in getting started on this project, we have issues here that some are tagged as good first issues that you can take a look at. And in terms of getting started, our documentation is kind of split into those three different parts of the app. So we have the API, we have the front end app, and then we have the admin app. This is kind of like a big mono repo. We have things in different folders, and each of those folders has their own README file here that should walk you through what it takes to get started in so that you can run everything locally and get building the application locally. All right, so I've already done that. I've been working on the project for a while here, so let me just head over to my local folder. So over here at TwoWeeksReady, I'm going to head over to the API. And I'm going to start by opening this in... I'm kind of trying to decide, do I want to do this in Visual Studio Code or do I want to do it in Visual Studio? I think I'm actually going to do it in Visual Studio. No, I'm going to do it in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so with code, I'm going to open up this code workspace solution. A workspace in Visual Studio Code, it's just a file that tells us which folders to open in Visual Studio together all at once, which is kind of the reason we have to do that is that our API actually references this TwoWeeksReady.common project that is in a separate folder. So that workspace file just allows us to group that together so that all the projects that we need to open are open here in Visual Studio altogether. All right, so what does it take to actually update a function app over from .NET 3.1 to .NET 6? I'm really not sure. But we'll figure it out here together. Let's have a look. So to recap, this is our function app, the TwoWeeksReady.csproj here within the API folder. And we can see its SDK type is Microsoft.NET SDK, the target framework is 3.1, and the Azure Functions version is v3. The functions themselves are broken into separate folders. So we have, for example, like the hazard info API here that has a number of functions in it. There's one to get the list of all the hazard infos, get individual ones by ID, and then different ones to do things like create and update and delete hazard info. That's the API in a nutshell. Under the covers, that API is using Cosmos DB to actually store and retrieve that data. But I don't think we'll need to make too many changes there. I'm hoping that this is a fairly straightforward update, but let's pull up some documentation and just make sure that my assumption of that is correct. Update.NET or update Azure Functions to .NET 6. Maybe we can find some somewhat official documentation on this. Now generally available. There we go. Migrating from 3 to 4. All right, so first thing is to update the target framework here, which we were just looking at. I've zoomed in too far. Migrating from 3 to 4. Okay, so highly backwards compatible. That's reassuring. Hopefully that's not also a lie. But let's have a look. Okay, so it's telling us the target framework we update to 6, easy enough, and the framework version to v4. So let's go have a look at that. That's these guys here. So this is going to be just .NET 6.0. Right, and v4 for the functions version. Okay. What's next, docs? In process or isolated function? I think I'm okay with in process. So there are some things, because this has already been deployed, we do have a development version of the application up in Azure. There might be some things that we need, some config settings that we need to go change. So that's fine. Let's just start by updating it locally, make sure things run locally, and then we'll see what we need to do up on the Azure, in the Azure portal if there's any changes we need to make there. I can see that Jeff is just wrapping up his PR, which is very exciting. So I'm just going to see actually if this runs locally. I do need to update this Functions SDK would be the other thing that I need to update, and probably a whole bunch of other ones, like Azure Storage Blobs is probably okay. But these ones I'm thinking I might also need to update. But let's start with this Nuget package for the SDK for .NET Functions. It just says 4.0 or later. We're going to have to pull up, I think, Nuget. And I want to see what the current version of this is that I have a link there already. 4.1.0 would be the version that I should be using. So let's update that guy. And let's just check some more of these and see if any more need to be updated. Just gonna pull this over here to make it a little bit quicker. So that one, we're already on the latest version. The other one that I'm curious about is around these extensions. So this one, there's a version 5, which I suspect I should be updating to. Interesting. That might be some breaking changes. That's a pretty big update from 3.1 to 5. And this one, there's previews, but I don't want to do a preview version. We're still on the latest, almost the latest. I'm just going to update this one to 3.1.0. We're going to start with this. I might come back and do another pass on these updates, but I just want to see if this runs. I see Visual Studio Code is prompting me to do a .NET restore here. I'm actually just going to do that from the command line though. Just got an alert that Jeff has submitted that pull request. So once he raids the channel here, we'll go and do a quick review of that. Okay, .NET Restore worked. That's a good first sign. Let's see if it runs. So to run this function app, I believe there's already a launch profile here. Maybe there isn't. I thought there was. Let me check the README. It's been a little while. I think I can just press F5 and that should actually run the API for me locally. Let's see if I'm successful. We've got a function app running. Good sign. Runtime version is still 3.0, and I was expecting that to be version 4, I thought. Huh, interesting. Stop that. Just waiting on folks to go up here from Jeff's live stream over on Twitch. And then we're gonna get started by reviewing Jeff's PR, and we'll come back to this update that I was working on here for the .NET for the updating the functions app to version 4. I think it was working, but we need to do a little bit of testing locally. I'm actually going to do that testing probably through the admin app that Jeff just finished updating through. pull up that while we get started here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my portion of the live streaming event today. We are taking over from Jeff Fritz, and I saw that I got a notification. He just submitted a pull request to the repo. Let's take a look. There it is, updated to .NET 6 and consolidated program.cs. Also added some error handling, which was great, making it a little bit easier for people to get started so that they're not just seeing error pages. Let's see what there's a try catch. Fixed this bug where you couldn't add a new hazard, which was kind of funny. More try catch. We've consolidated program.cs and startup.cs into one place, which is great. Yeah, looks good. This is all the same, I believe. Yeah. Looks good to me. There's the thing I wanted to see, upgraded to .NET 6. So let's approve those changes. And assuming the build succeeded, oh, actually there is no build for this yet on the admin app, but we're just going to squash and merge that, and then I'm going to update my local version. We can have a look and make sure that this is all running the way we expect it to. Confirm and squash. Seeing a whole bunch of follows from some new viewers. Thanks for the follows. David West, who will be streaming with us later today. Let's see. Okay, cool. This is merged. I'm gonna update here, do a git pull on my repo. And then I'm actually gonna go and open this up in Visual Studio now, instead of Visual Studio Code. Part of the reason I want to do that is for the Nuget package Explorer. I think it's just going to be a little bit easier to work through that. And also going to just revert this change. I was testing something locally. So the only change I have right now is that I tried updating my function app to v4. And now we should have our version of the admin app here using .NET 6. And I'm just going to run this and see if it will connect to my local API running in also .NET 6 now. We'll see if that all works together, plays nicely together the way we hope it does. So here's my function app starting up. And that did not work. A host error occurred during startup. Okay, so this time when I ran it up from the command line, it was not using the version 4 of the function runtime. I think that's because I didn't have that version of the function core tools installed, just like in the command line here. But when I run from Visual Studio, it has it installed as part of Visual Studio 2022. It just has those latest bits installed for me. And now it's complaining about these versions of the Cosmos DB and storage extensions. So I do need to go and update those. And I kind of thought I might have to. So let's just go here and do manage Nuget packages. This is for the API project. The solution has both the admin app and the API project in it. And I'm just going to go into here and let's take a look at what we need to update. So we had I was complaining about this one. It says I need to update to 5.0. Well, to a newer version anyway. I'm going to try going to 5 and we'll just see if that causes us any problems. So that was for the Azure Web Jobs extension storage package. And then the other one that I think was causing some issues here was this guy. No, that one was already on the latest. Okay. What other updates is it suggesting that I do? That's a relatively minor update. We might as well just go through and do these updates while we're in here. Sure what we're using image sharp for in this project. Didn't know that we were. See a question here from B1 and core. Is there a language implementation? Or first, will it only be English? So currently we're targeting English just because that's kind of the resources that we have to build this. But we actually do have an issue in here in our repo to configure the app for localization. So here, the first thing is just to investigate, what would it take to add support for multiple languages? It is something we'd like to put in place probably sooner rather than later, because if we wait too long, it can be a little hard to get that back in there once there's a lot of code that's been written. And Carrie has suggested a potential solution here for Vue.js localization, which is something to look into. But yes, that's a good first issue if you're a person who has any experience with localization to come in and look at the app and see what it would take to support that. But yes, we do intend to build that in so that it can be translated to other languages. All right, back to this update. Let's see if we've updated enough things that this is gonna, it's probably also this storage extension that needs to update. Let's do that. These other updates I think are more minor and shouldn't be causing the application to crash on startup. So let's see if that's enough to get it running. Okay, well, that's the admin app started up, but we're still having issues with this one starting up. It's telling me that I need to, okay, so it says Microsoft Azure, this is really small. Microsoft Azure Web Jobs Extension Storage 3010 does not meet the minimum requirements 4040. But I did just update that, so that's strange that it's still complaining about using an older version. So what is up with that? I can see that I have definitely updated here. Is there some other, I don't think there's any dependencies in this project now that it's referencing. Let's do a rebuild, because maybe rebuild, do that a bunch of times and hope it does something differently this time around. All right. Okay, we got a little bit further. So now it says a host error during startup. Secreted initialization from blob storage failed due to a missing Azure storage connection string. Azure Web Jobs secret storage type. Okay, this is new. I haven't seen this error before, but we did get further than we were last time. So let's head back to the documentation and see if they mentioned anything about that in here. Okay. Breaking changes. Forces minimum versions. We kind of hit that already. HTTP client. Huh. It is strange, but you know what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and create a new project. Give me 1 second here, and I'm just going to compare what that looks like when I create a new one. We're going to create a new function app. Call it function app 1. Like any good function app. It's .NET 6. It has a storage emulator, so let's see. There must be some little piece of configuration that's different here that it's expecting. And the places where you would find configuration is here. So we have use development storage equals true in local settings.json. I'm pretty sure that we already have that over in our project. Oh, maybe we don't. Okay, that might be it. So Azure Web Jobs Storage, use development storage equals true. And then the other thing that might be different is this host.json. We'll just make sure that we aren't missing anything there. I believe that one is the same. That is slightly different the way they've structured this app insights piece. I don't expect that to be the thing that's causing the problem. So let's run this and see if adding that one local setting made a difference here. Good. The admin app's firing up fine. Let's see if this guy does. Come on. Yes, it's running. Fantastic. Okay. Looking good. Let's just make sure I can log in here and then see the local hazard infos that I have in my local database, which I should see here. Eflam, thanks for the follow. All right, hey, there we go. We're talking to our local API that is now updated to .NET 6. So we can see I made a call here to get hazard info list, and then I made a call to get hazard info by ID to render this page here. This is all working as I expect it to now, which is great. That is updated to .NET 6. So I'm basically ready to submit a PR here, but one thing that we should do is update our Readme files because we've also changed our prerequisites for the application. So let's take a look at here, because I think there's a Readme in this folder right here. So here we need the .NET 6 SDK. Let's make sure that that link is still the right link to be using. It is. So that's good. And then the other one is this core tools. So let's make sure that that's updated to get the version 4 of those tools. Why are these all still referencing version 3 of the tools? How do I install version 4? It's a bit strange. So when I'm running it here through Visual Studio, as I noted before, the core version, or the core tools version is 403971. But when I'm over here in Visual, or just in my terminal, I do a func dash version. I'm on version 3. So how do I update this one to version 4? And why is there no documentation on that? There's a download for it. And I just do this to update it. Change this to 4 at 4. Will that work? It does. Seems like the documentation needs to be updated there, but we'll at least update our README. So we'll call it version 4. And let's call this version 2022. The rest should all be the same. Oh, and very important is to add that piece to the local settings JSON that folks need to add. So everybody's going to run into the same problem. And I think that's it. Yes, of course, ask questions. Always happy to answer questions, have a conversation about the code we're writing. You need help with MATLAB. I am not the right person to ask that question, unfortunately. I have not seen or touched MATLAB in probably close to 20 years. Did use it once for a project. That was a very, very long time ago. All right. So I think we have everything updated that we needed updating. Let's just save everything here and do a quick review. Not that one. Our app, we've got this updated to .NET 6 version 4 of the runtime. All our packages that needed updating are updated. And we have the README file also updated. So let's create a new branch. Functions app, .NET 6.0. I think we're just going to add everything here, git add dot, commit -m, update function app to version 6, .NET 6. We'll push that up here and then we'll create a pull request for it over in GitHub. Right, here's GitHub, pull requests. There. I always like to review my changes again here, even though I just did that through my GitHub client, or through the Git client in Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio. I still like to come in through here and give it another check. But this looks good. And then we actually had a GitHub issue here that we can reference. So I'm just gonna say resolves 132, and we'll create that pull request. And hopefully one of our other contributors who is watching on the stream can help us out with that and give that a review. Once that gets reviewed, it's going to get merged in to, actually, this might fail our checks. I'm actually kind of hoping it does, because there are some other things that we need to change that I hadn't thought about. And we do have some continuous integration that's happening here that I expect might fail because it might be using the wrong version of .NET. All right, so question about how do you expect the users to communicate without the cloud? So what we do if the cloud goes down, so we are building the application in a way that it can run offline. So the idea is that when there is a connection available, we do make a call to the cloud to get the latest data. But that all gets stored locally on the user's device as well, so that if they come back to the device and they either don't have a connection or they're not able to communicate with the backend in the cloud, then they do have local versions of the data cache, so they can still get to their family plan. They can still review the hazard info and everything, even if they don't have a connection. That is pretty core to the design of the application as well. So very good question. Thank you. The cloud, in fact, does go offline. It does happen. Not much. It's part of designing a cloud first application is that you need to consider when things might not be available. Why not a pin to encrypt file on top of the cloud connection. We are planning to do some encryption at that level as well. We just haven't gotten to that part of the application yet. We do want to build out some of the functionality first, and then we are going to get to that encryption piece. It's again a core part of the application that we need to address. We do want to make sure that that data is encrypted and other people can't view it. Even us as administrators of the system can't go into the database and see other people's family plans and emergency kits and that sort of thing. All right, so why did the GitHub actions not run for that? It was supposed to run, and I'm not sure why it didn't. Very strange, but you know what? I'm just gonna run it against my branch manually. It was supposed to happen on its own, and for some reason it didn't, but let's just see. So I expect I do need to go and update this pipeline here. So we have kind of a staged build that happens here. There's the build that happens for every pull request is what's supposed to happen. Didn't happen for some reason here, and we'll look into that. But that just does like a compile, and in theory would run some tests if we had some unit tests. But we'll build the app and make sure that it compiles, which it didn't, and I kind of expected. Once that gets merged into master, or now main, because Carrie renamed that for us, once we merge that to the main branch and complete the pull request, it will build again, and then it's going to deploy it to our dev environment up in the cloud. And then from there, we have the ability to promote that up to the beta environment, which is something that we do just like once we're ready for people to do some beta testing, once we've finished some additional features and we're ready for kind of that next level of testing. And then eventually we'll have that production environment as well that we deploy to. All right, so that failed. Kind of expected it to. Probably has to do with the version of .NET being the wrong version. So we do need to go and update this workflow file as well as part of this pull request. So to do that, I am going to go, there's a folder called .github in the repo. Not .git, but .github. And in there, there's workflow files. There's a workflows folder. This is all kind of the convention of GitHub and where you define GitHub actions. But in there's a bunch of YAML files that define what we do to build the application. So here, again, very strange that this didn't get triggered. That's why, because we renamed master domains. So good stuff. We'll get that all cleaned up here too. All right, so here it's complaining, or the reason it failed was because we set up the workflow to go and get .NET Core, but it's getting the wrong version. So we need to change that to 6.0.x. And that should actually be enough to fix the problem. And I think that's the only place that that's referenced. We're going to do that for all of these. We're going to go and update that to main so we can get our workflows running again. Again, here now, we are going to just set this up to do .NET 6.0.0 for the admin app, 6.0.x. We were setting up two versions here when we were building the admin app because we needed 3.1 to build the API and 5.0 to build the that admin app, and it was kind of weird because we were using two different versions of that. But I just noticed also I need to change the place where that gets published to or built locally to will change. So here I need to change that also to .NET 6.0 instead of .NET Core App 3.1. Fixing all our workflow problems here in one go is the plan. And there's one other workflow we have that is for the front end of the application, but that one doesn't involve .NET at all because it's a Vue-based JavaScript application that's all done using Node. So that one shouldn't change at all. All right, so those workflows are updated. We'll add them. Date, branch name, and .NET version. Now, once I push that, I expect that my CI pipeline, the actions are actually going to run now for that pull request once it detects that I made that change. And there you can see it did trigger them the way I expected to again, which is great. While that's running, I see that we have some more questions, which Richard has been answering in the chat. Thank you, Richard. People can plan locations to go to during an emergency, for example, a list of things to have during an emergency. Yeah, so those are some examples of the types of things that we would define in the application. And best place to go to see that is actually in the wireframes, which we have a link to if you go to the client app portion here. You can head over to the wireframes, which Dante has created, which gives us an idea of what we're trying to build here in terms of the functionality. So one of those is around the kits. So here we have the ability to build an emergency kit, and there's a calculator that will help you to do that based on you can input how many adults, children, pets, and cars you have, and then build up your emergency kits, and it will guide you through the process of what kinds of things you might need there. But another big part of that is, as you were alluding to, is making a plan. So you can add people to your family plan so that you know how many people you have and how to contact individuals. But one of the things in that plan, I'm trying to find where that is yeah, there's this idea of like action steps. So the things that you might need to do in your home, like turn off the natural gas and pick up your kids. The other one is this concept of a reunification plan. So you might have, your family might have a plan of, in case of an emergency, we should meet at this location. And then you would also have a backup location if that location isn't accessible. Maybe you can't get to it because it's a disaster and it took that location, just you can't get to it, right? So those are the types of things that we would be defining as part of your family plan. It'd be those action steps. And that's all laid out here in the Adobe XD designs that Dante has created for us. So, all right, let's have a look at that pull request and see if they did in fact succeed, which is great. And yeah, so the build succeeded now, and it was able to create a package for us, which is fantastic. I think if that code looks good, maybe I can get a review from one of our other friendly contributors on the project. And then we can look at what it'll take to get this deployed up to our cloud dev instance of this. So that version that I'm referring to, I've talked about a few times how we deploy to this live version. There's actually a link to that here on the main README of the repo. So everything that gets merged into the master branch, you can go and try that out live for yourself by clicking on this link, and it's going to take you to sasquatch.2wr.org, where you can log in. If you don't have an account already, you can go and create an account through there. And then you have the ability to come in here and use the application. So you can take a look at, for example, learning your hazards. We're missing some logos or icons here, and also this looks very strange on a desktop device because it is designed to be on a mobile device. But you can see here that we have, for example, earthquakes, tsunamis, and all these different hazards that are defined. And within those, you can look at the before, during, and after steps, which this is information that's all configured through the admin app. And also the additional resources that are just linking out to other places that are of interest if you want to learn more about those hazards. That's kind of an area that has more of the functionality fleshed out. The make a plan and build a kit is definitely more in progress as the designs have kind of been changing since we got started on some of it, but there is some functionality there, and I know that some of our other streamers will be working on that later today. I know Sean Wildermuth, who's last up in the day, he will be working for sure in the Vue.js app and trying to flesh out some of that functionality. But anybody can go and try it now. It's deployed live. Now, I actually expect that that's going to break. I said it's there and you can try it, but I think that Carrie just merged my pull request. And in fact, there it is. It has been merged, which, as I said, should trigger these GitHub actions to run again. And this time, because they're on the master branch, I expect them to go and try to deploy that out to Azure for us in that dev environment. And there it is, doing the deployment. I suspect, okay, so it did deploy it. Well, why does it say the deployed beta failed? That's not correct. Well, we'll come back to that one. That one's actually supposed to sit there and wait for somebody to approve the deployment to beta. It's not supposed to show as failed. Not sure why it's doing that, but now that this has been deployed to the dev environment, I actually expect that it will be broken because I think there's some changes that we need to do to that deployment to make it work with .NET 6. But let's go and test it. Maybe it'll just work, and I'm wrong about that. Let's head back over to that dev version. I'm going to open that in a new window this time, and we'll make it small. So I'll pop open my dev tools so we can kind of see what this is doing while we're at it. And I'm going to go to learn your hazards because I know that makes a call to my API. It's thinking, it's starting up probably, is what it's doing, or attempting to. And it failed. Okay, we got a 503 error. Not totally unexpected, as I said. There's changes that we need to do there. And I think that was actually mentioned in here that we probably had some changes to make. So we're going from 3 to 4. Locally, everything should be fine, but on Azure, they have this pre-update validator. Okay, so there's some stuff we can do there. Let's go have a look. I'm going to get signed into the Azure portal. Window. Just give me 1 second while I get in there. All right, heading over to this particular resource. So I'm in the Azure portal in the Humanitarian Toolbox subscription, looking at this 2WR dev. That's the one that just failed. So let's go over. It's telling me to head to diagnose and solve. And it says that there is a functions 4.0 pre-upgrade validator, which I guess I should have done before trying to do the deployment, but that's okay. We'll deal with it now instead. Diagnose and solve problems is what it told me to go to. And then where? Diagnose and solve, search for common problems or tools. Anybody see? Oh, there it is. So here I need to search for functions 4.x. There it is. If you're someone who uses App Service or Azure Functions, which runs on App Service, for your day-to-day work, this area that we're in right now, the diagnose and solve common problems, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that's super useful in trying to diagnose these types of issues, like especially when the app service won't start up. Lots of really useful stuff in here. It's kind of hidden, but it can really help with guiding you through the problem. So let's see what it says here. Well, first let's read the docs. So it says to migrate an app from 3, set the functions extension version to approximately 4 is how I like to read that. And it says I can do that with that command, but yeah, what's it? First of all, what did that thing tell me? Is there good there? That's just an informational thing. Informational thing. thing. I think those should all be okay. But what it's telling me I do need to do is come into my configuration here, and there should be an app setting called this functions extension version. So I'll just wait for that to come up. Zoom in a bit too. So that's this one here, and it's set to 4 currently. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to change it to, or it was set to 3, and I'm going to change it to 4. And this is saying use the .NET runtime. And okay, so I've changed that to 4. And we'll save that and see if it solves our problem. Hopefully it's as easy as that. And then we can move on to the next thing I was looking to do, which was around running our end-to-end tests. Just wait a second to make sure that that's running here before I expect this to return probably a 404 because there's no endpoint at that. Okay, Azure, your Functions 4 app is running. That sounds reassuring. Let's take a look and see if it's actually running. If I go back here, and then I click on Learn Your Hazards again, it should try to make that request to get my list of hazards. And it worked. Success. All right. I was worried that was going to be a lot harder than it was. So that's it. We're updated to .NET 6 with both the admin app and the functions app, and it's all running in the deployed version. So we are in good shape. Excellent. I'm going to close that. I'm probably done with the portal, but I'm just going to keep it around on that side. And we are done with that one. So did it close the GitHub issue for me? It did. Cool. That one is closed. Making progress. Excellent. All right. So next up that I wanted to look at was we have a set of end-to-end tests. So this is going to involve, in order for me to get it running, I kind of have to have like everything running locally. There's the API has to be running, Cosmos DB emulator has to be running, my front-end app needs to be running. All those things need to be running locally in order for me to fire up these tests and run them. Now, what we're using is a tool called Playwright to run our tests. If you're not familiar with Playwright, this is a browser automation engine, basically. If you've written end-to-end tests before, you might have used something like Selenium, or there's a few other ones around the block, but one thing they generally all have in common is that they can be a little bit flaky sometimes. Like it just, the tests run once and then you run them again and something fails. So one of the goals with Playwright is to just make it a lot easier to write these tests, first of all, and also just make it way more reliable, so that it's, from run to run, you're not getting those flaky tests that they pass sometimes and they fail other times. So this bit of history of the project is that I think it's actually written by a lot of the people who wrote Puppeteer when they worked for Google, and they maybe moved over, I think, to work for Microsoft and wrote Playwright. So it's kind of like a successor in some ways to Puppeteer. But I've been using it a fair bit, just mostly playing around with it to learn it. But I've been really happy with what I've seen. And if we look at our client app, which I'm gonna get everything running locally here so that we can give this a try. So to get to the client app, I go to this 2WR app folder. And in here, I'm just going to open this up in Visual Studio Code now. So here to run the app, I do an npm run serve to run it locally, and I'll just do that to make sure that everything's running. I also do need the function app running though, so I'm just going to run everything. I guess I already do have the function app running here because I have the admin app running. And the other thing that I have running is my local Cosmos DB emulator. So this is a lot of stuff to get set up to run locally. One of the things that David West has been working on is getting configured with dev containers to make this onboarding a little easier for people if they want to contribute on the project. So in that case, what you would do is you just open up the you have all of this running inside of a Docker container, and you connect Visual Studio Code to that using the dev containers functionality of VS Code. And then everything's just kind of self-contained and running within that container. So you don't have to like individually run all of these different pieces to get things going. Ultimately, that's going to be important if we want to try to, well, first of all, make it easier for people to contribute to the project without doing all of this setup to get things up and running. But also, if we wanted to run some of these end-to-end tests inside of it, GitHub Actions, it would be helpful if we could do that using that container, because it will already have everything set up that we need set up. All right, so I do have the API running now. If I go over to my front end app, it's npm run serve will build the Vue app for me locally and then make it available on local port, I want to say 8080. But we'll see what it prompts me with here once that build is complete. Right, starting the local development server. One thing I forgot to check before doing this is that I'm on the right version of, or a version of Node that's going to work for this application. I work on a lot of different projects and they all require different versions of Node, but it looks like it ran, so it should be okay. Okay, I'm going to get logged in. So this is the local version of my app here on localhost port 8080. I can go to learn my hazards, and we should see a list of a few different hazard infos, hopefully. Working on something, but it kind of looks like it's going to time out on me. Or maybe it already has failed here. Ending. Weird thing where my function app was kind of in a pause state there, but there it is. Okay, so it's working locally. I'm able to get to the hazard info and get data. So my manual end-to-end test is working. Let's take a look at these automated ones and where we're at with them. So over in, there's a couple things. There's a playwright.config that tells us what it needs to do to run the test. So for example, running npm serve to fire up the web server locally. That's kind of the first step it needs to do. And then the tests themselves are defined here under a test folder. And the only spec we have so far is this welcome page. So the first time you get to this site, to the app, you're prompted with this welcome page, which just has like kind of explains a little bit about the application. You hit next, 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 and then you log in or sign up for an account. And one of the things that we wanted to do was check the accessibility of that site. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we are building is accessible, and that's what this test does. So it's using something called Axe Playwright. Axe Core is a library that's used to do automated accessibility testing on web applications. And what this does is we're using Playwright to kind of drive that, but we use Playwright to launch a Chromium instance, go to this specific page, the welcome page, and inject Axe to it, and then we check the accessibility of the page. You can give it some options for what rules you want to test and how you want it to report on that. And then we have another one that just says, hey, the welcome page actually loads. So if you go to, if you're going to the root page for the first time, then we expect it to take you to the welcome page. So those are the two tests that we run. And the way we can run those now is to run Playwright Test. So you do have to have Playwright installed, which I believe I do. Already have Playwright installed globally. I do not. I lied. But it is installed here as a dev dependency. So I think that's going to work if I do it through this npm script. So if I do, npm run e to e tests, that should, in theory, work. By default, the way Playwright's configured, it's going to run these tests headless, which means that there will be no browser UI that opens up. Like I can't see it clicking on the things and going through the tests. But there is an option to run it so that you are able to view it. Okay, so those two tests pass. Just out of curiosity, though, I kind of like to see it sometimes run. So let's head over to the Playwright docs again, which I had open somewhere. Playwright.dev, go to the docs, under Playwright Test, command line. There is a way to do this, right? So there's an option here for dash headed. So if I just add that to the test, it should do its thing. So this first test that we're running actually doesn't hit the API or anything. So it's kind of a good first thing to get started with because we don't have to have as many things running if I wanted to get this going in GitHub Actions. And I'm kind of curious if I can get that running. I don't have to have the API or a database or handle login or anything. And then we can kind of build up from there. So there it is navigating to the page for me in the Chromium browser. It didn't do a lot because it doesn't really click on anything yet, but it showed me that that was running, which is kind of cool. All right, so what we can do from here, how do we want to run this inside of our, like ultimately what I would like to do is every time somebody submits a pull request for the front end application, that it not only builds the app to make sure it compiles, it also runs the app and runs through these tests. So I'm curious if I can actually just do something really easy here. And I had the workflows file open. I wonder if I can just run the tests and that would be enough for it to work. It might not be, but we can start with that. First thing I should do here is create a new branch. So I'm going to switch back to main. Git switch main. Pull down the changes that we made. It says I made a change to package.json. I didn't think I made a change to package.json. Oh yeah, I added that headed part. We don't actually want to check that in. That would be bad. But I'm going to create a new branch now. Git checkout -b run e tests. Okay. Let's take a look at this workflow file for the front end app, and maybe we can just do a npm run. So we do an npm run CI, or npm CI, which installs the packages. We write out some environment variables to have it pointing to the right thing. I actually want to do that maybe after I do the tests. So I'm going to start with here. This I think is the right place for me to inject this. I'm going to say npm run, what was it called? It's my other Chrome, or not Chrome, VS Code instance, e to e tests. In directory is that folder again. don't know that this is going to work, but I'm kind of curious what GitHub Actions is going to do with it. Does it have everything installed on uh, that build agent that it can run this for me? Oh, this is in the wrong place. I was editing the deploy to beta portion of the workflow, which is not what I wanted to do. So this workflow file is split into a number of different jobs, which we showed in the GitHub UI under GitHub Actions. But basically, that each job is one of those boxes we saw. So there's build, deploy to dev, and deploy to beta. So I'm going to try to put this here in the build step. I want to do it before I update those environment files. So I'm going to right here do npm run end-to-end tests just to see if that actually works, and then we'll kind of work through any errors that we do come up or run into, see what other changes we might need to make. This might end up being a completely different stage because the build is actually building like a version of the app that we can deploy to the dev environment that has all the dev secrets in it, in terms of like which, well, they're not really secrets, but which API it should be talking to and all that. When we run these end-to-end tests on the server, we probably are going to want to have it all running locally, all talking locally. So I think that we'll be able to, we might need to split it up into a separate job. So we'll have a build job and a CI job. We'll see. All right. So we are going to just check this in, I think, and see how it runs. So that's one of the things I really like about GitHub Actions, and that the workflows are part of my code, is that I can make a change to the workflow file itself and then submit that as a PR, and then those changes will run just in that PR. It won't get picked up for all the other PRs until it gets merged to the main branch. So I should be able to now just check in commit these changes, submit a PR, and see how it runs. Git status, git add. Oh, did I thought I added something here. Oh, right. It's typing on the wrong keyboard. All right. There's my change. Let's push this up there. So I'm going to come in here and say git run ed tests PR. Commit and publish the branch. And then we're going to go submit a PR and see what happens. All right, creating a new pull request. One of the things I do wish was a little bit easier with GitHub Actions is that I could just run them locally and test this locally without having to publish a pull request to see how it behaves. But I know there is a way to do that. It's just not easy, and I don't know how to set it up. So did that trigger anything? Or is it it's not triggering the workflow to run? Funny, we're running into that issue again. I thought I had updated them all to say that they need to run against the main branch. Did I miss this one? Let's have a look. Oh yeah, this one's still I guess I didn't update this one. Does master exist anywhere else here? No. Okay, one more change to this guy. Hit and push. That should trigger it the way I was expecting to. I'm glad we're working through all these little glitches that we had in our pipelines. It's always nice to have that feedback immediately on a pull request if you're breaking things or not. Well, that's great. David West says he knows how to run those GitHub actions locally. So if you want to see how that works, tune into his stream later today. Hey, let's see what this is going to do. Failed. Oh. Failed to launch Chromium. npx Playwright install to download the browsers. Okay. That kind of makes sense. So it's telling me that it's unable to actually run the tests because the Chromium browser isn't actually installed locally. And to do that, you need to run this command. So that is props to the Playwright team. Really well written error message. I'm not left hunting, trying to figure out what it is that went wrong and why that failed. So what I'm going to do here is just add another step in my workflow before running the tests that says run npx playwright install, and it's going to be in that directory again. In that directory because that's where my package JSON is lives and where it references Playwright as a dev dependency. So that should be all it takes to get that going. I'm gonna head over to the command line, maybe. Yep. Install Playwright browsers. What am I doing here? I'm in the wrong folder. Okay, push that change up and we'll see how that workflow runs this time around. Oh, that's probably going to fail also. Oh, we'll see. I think it's going to be missing a .env file because we don't have one defined yet. And we need one set up for just local development. Which I think what we can do is just make a copy of. There's a sample file here that we can make a copy of. It sets everything up just for local development. We'll do that as a starting point. Okay, back to here. You can see that it kicked off the workflow to run again. We can go to details. We're getting a little further along. But as I said, I do kind of expect it to fail still. We'll see. David West, I think you're going to do more than try. I think you're going to show us how that all works. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, we failed, but in a different way than we failed last time. So that's progress, I think. Whoa, lots of stuff here. It's quite the log. How do we get to the part that I care about? There we go. Okay, so it's telling me there were, it did run the tests, but I think what happened is when it fired it up, it actually just failed in terms of not being able to launch the app because it's missing that .env file. I think that's what's happening. But this is again something with testing that's a little bit hard sometimes because now it's failing on my build server, but I don't know really what happened. Like, it would be nice if I had like a picture, a screenshot of what the UI looked like at that time, so that I can see why it failed. And that's something we can do. Let's take a look at the Playwright documentation and see if we can add that in here. So we're getting started. There is a way to pull out an image. And what I'd like to do is take that image and then upload it to as a build artifact so that I can go and review what it is that happened there. But let's just see what they recommend in here. So they've got these built-in reporters. That's kind of what we're seeing, where it just reports out what happened. That's fine. There's also an HTML reporter. I don't think that's what we want. Oh, there's GitHub annotations. Okay. You can use built-in GitHub reporter to get automatic failure automation when running GitHub actions. Okay. I mean, that sounds useful. So we just change the reporter depending on if we're running in GitHub actions or not. That's kind of neat. Let's have a look at that. It's not quite what I was looking for, but that's also something I think we should do. So that's over in the Playwright config.js, and it's telling me to just add a reporter that says, so if we're running in CI, this is an environment variable we can look for to determine if we're running under the context of a continuous integration build or not. And if we are, then we're going to use the GitHub reporter. Otherwise, we're going to use a list. So this should still run locally the same way it was running. And then when I push it up to GitHub, I'd expect it to get reported out a little bit differently. So let's just see what that does locally first. Running. So that looks like it's running the same way as it was previously, which is good. Yeah, so we can just go and we'll commit this change. We're just going to let that run. That's going to trigger a new run for us, and then we'll see what it did that's different in terms of how it reported out the failure. This is the new run. Still going to fail. What I'd really like to do is get to that point where failed too quickly. Can't be done yet. Is it done already? No. I was linking to the old build, I think, is what was happening. All right, we'll let that run. We'll come back to it. It failed. Oh, cannot find module GitHub. Okay, that was my bad. I probably also need to install something for that to work. Is the GitHub reporter. Looking at the documentation here, and I'm expecting that there must be a package I need to install for that. You know what, we're just going to back out of that change. I'm going to come back to it later. I don't think it's required for what I'm trying to accomplish here, so we're going to go back to that Playwright config file and we're going to change it. Change that back, we'll revert that change. What I wanted to do was see if there's a way that when it fails, we can take a screenshot of the change. So there is this concept with Playwright of doing, taking a screenshot basically of what the page looked like. So just trying to find it in the documentation. There's quite a lot of stuff here, but there's this concept of screenshots. And all you do is you say page.screenshot and you tell it where to put the screenshot. And that's it. So you can tell it to just take the visible portion of the page, or you can tell it to scroll the whole page and take a screenshot of that and save it as a PNG for you. But really easy to get a screenshot. What I'm not sure of is how I incorporate that into my build so that I upload it into a pipeline or a build artifact that I can go and view later on. So I suspect somebody's done this before. Playwright take screenshot on failure. Ah, there's even an automatic screenshots thing, so that's cool. Automatic screenshots, that sounds like what we want. Okay, so use screenshots only on failure. Screenshots will appear in a test output directory, typically test results. Okay, so let's add that to our config, and this I'm going to try to reproduce locally before we push those changes up to GitHub. What isn't it like about that? Did I put that in the wrong place? I think I did. Use screenshots, okay. Use screenshots only on failure. So what I'm going to do is try to reproduce the error here. I think that env and sample env are the same file. So I'm going to delete this file locally for myself. And then I'm going to try running the tests and see what it does. Run those tests. If the docs are correct, I should expect them to, and I'm able to reproduce the problem that we're seeing on the GitHub Actions. I expect this to fail, the test to fail, and then I expect to see a test results folder here that's going to contain some screenshots of what happened that will help me to understand what it is that failed. Okay, that did fail, so that's, I think, good. And there's the failures. So we actually get a whole folder of, or it gets put into a folder. So here's our test welcome page accessibility. So there's a folder that matches the name of the test that failed, and then there's a screenshot of what it looked like when it failed. Curious why it failed though. I was expecting it to look completely different than that. But what's it telling me? It says One accessibility violation was detected. Sure, HTML contains non-empty title. Oh, interesting. Is there something from our env file that gets put into the title? Oh yeah, the title of the app. Interesting that that got caught by the test. Is that the same test that's failing for us over here? Well, I think this is a good thing in that I'm able to reproduce it. A couple of things, I'm probably going to add test results to my git ignore here. So I'm going to say or that folder. I don't want to check those in. And what I'm going to want to do is modify my workflow file now so that it uploads whatever those test results were as a build artifact so that I can see what it is that failed, or see what the UI looked like when it failed. So that I don't remember how to do, but let's see if we can figure it out. When we do a deployment to dev, I think we upload this file as an artifact. At least I thought we did. Maybe we don't for this front end build, but I think that we do for the other builds. Yes. So right here we upload an artifact with a specific name. Give it a path. So this upload artifact, I wonder if I can point it at a folder, if it has to be a single file. Let's go see if we can find some documentation on that. If I can point it just at that folder, it would be ideal. So then I don't have to do very much work. I can just literally point it at that folder. Multi-path upload, specify wildcard, specify a directory. Okay. Well, seems easy enough then. So basically I'm going to do that. I'm going to say this for this one. The only thing I'm not sure is if this passes, if the tests pass, is there a chance that that folder doesn't exist at all, and then this upload artifacts thing failed? So this is going to be upload end-to-end test results. And the path is going to be /twr app/test-results. And the name is going to be test results. I'll call it end-to-end test results. Okay, we'll give this a try. Screenshots on failure for end-to-end tests. Let's commit and push that change, and we'll let that run and see if we get some nice screenshots uploaded as part of our GitHub action workflow. We might need to make this, oh, wait. By default, this isn't going to run because if the previous, if that previous task fails, it doesn't run the rest of the actions here. So that's interesting. It's a GitHub Actions thing that I will need to Google because I don't know the answer of how it is that we make a task run even if the previous task failed. Oh, if no files found, it just warns you, so that's probably going to be okay. if failure. Upload artifacts only when the previous step of a job failed. Add if failure. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do here with this task. I'm probably just going to go ahead and add that. Add that to the right place, yeah. I'm having good luck with documentation today. The documentation is pointing me in the right direction, generally speaking. Isn't always the case when we're doing software development. Sometimes we get sent in the wrong direction, or the documentation is just not there at all. At that, be a lot of commits on this little PR. Not a lot of files changed, but lots of individual commits. Getting notifications on my watch that builds are failing. That's fun. Okay, so this should be the one that should fail the end-to-end tests and then should upload the screenshot for us, hopefully, as a GitHub artifact. This step does take a little while, and this might be, well, I guess it was pretty quick. Actually quicker than I expected it to. It must be caching the stuff that was installed from the last run. Hoping for that successful failure this time where it fails and we get to see a screenshot of what the app looked like when it failed. Okay, taking a look at this. Scroll all the way down. It looks like it was the same failure that we had locally. Scroll. Ensure each, yeah, so it has an empty title, which is the same failure we had locally. And it looks like it did go and upload. So now where you see those, if you go up to the summary, you'll see an artifact up here, which is pretty cool. So it says there's one artifact. Oh, and there it is, the end-to-end test results. So I can download that folder. It should just download it as a zip file for me. And then if I open the file, there's that folder, and then there's the test failure, and there it is. So that's what it looked like in GitHub Actions when the test failed. In this case, it doesn't actually show me what the problem was because the problem was in the HTML. Sometimes it is a visual thing, like you can see that, oh, I'm on like an error page that I wasn't expecting, and that's why my test failed. In this case, it's like something in the HTML, but we can fairly easily go and fix that now that we know what the problem is. So I can go over to my workflow file, and I'm going to have to add one more little piece to it before we run the end-to-end tests, and that is to create that sample env file for me before I run the tests. And this is just the build. It doesn't, yeah, that should be fine. I don't think I actually need to, oh yes I do, okay. Just talking to myself, and that's probably not making a whole lot of sense, but write sample env file for end-to-end tests. And what I want to do is copy the sample, which is called env-sample, I think. Yeah. Basically what I'm trying to do is copy that file here so that I have a .env file, which is necessary to get that title that we need for the app to run properly and have valid HTML. So I want to copy env. So instead of this, it's going to be copy dot slash 2wr dash app env dash sample. And I just need 1 second. I will be right back. And I'm back. Very quick break. Okay, so I'm just copying that sample file to a .env file locally before I run this. And then I'm going to run another command. Well, I don't need this, so that's just running a very simple command to copy a file. And then I actually want to delete it here before I do my final build, because when I run the build here, where I do npm run build, I actually want to run it against a version that contains some things that are configured from within our secrets in our GitHub repo settings. So here now I actually just want to do is it rm to delete? I think that's the right command. No. Okay, so I'm just going to do a .rm down here to clear out that file. And that should do the trick. So what do we have for local changes now? I think just that one. So this is going to be fix end-to-end tests. Failing. And we've pushed that, so we're going to see one last run with this pull request, and that should basically get it going. So one other thing, though, that I think we should do is align our node version that's being used inside this workflow file. So this is still referencing an older 2.0 or 12.0 version, or 12. Whatever is the latest of version 12. But I think that David West actually set up our dev container configuration. It's actually referencing 14 as the version of Node. Curious. Oh, 16. Yeah, 16 is the latest LTS. You're right. And that's what you're targeting then, is the latest LTS. Okay. We might do one last trial of running that then using 16 and just make sure that we're not running any issues. I'm on 14 here locally, but that's just because 16 actually didn't work for us in our production app that I'm working on. It broke a lot of things, oddly. It was not expected. All right. Are we going to see our actions actually succeed on this pull request now? I believe we will. In fact, we have. So the test succeeded. It'd be nice to get the better reporting on here for GitHub, I think, but I will do that probably as another one. There you go. No accessibility violations detected. 2 passed. So it passed all those tests. Skipped uploading the test results because there were no screenshots to upload in this case. And now it's doing the build like it always did. So we've successfully added end-to-end tests running as part of our CI pipeline, which is super cool. As I said, there's that one last change that I think we're going to try here, which is to toggle that over to using the latest LTS. Version 12 is really quite old. So let's see if we can run this workflow using Node 16. Lots of updates today. We did updates to .NET 6. We're updating to Node 16 in our GitHub Actions. We're going to be on the latest LTS of everything by the end of the day here. All right. I'm going to go make some notes on that pull request because there's quite a lot going on here now. Maybe more than we initially started out with when we were planning that change. I'm going to go and review all the changes that we made. I can't even remember now. Right, so we targeted the main branch instead of the old name of master. We've updated to node 16, and we're running those end-to-end tests. If we updated to node 6 and we fixed a typo in the test, I was hoping we could add more functionality to these tests, but not going to have time to do that today. That's okay. At least we have a little bit more of the infrastructure in place for running those tests, and we can continue to extend those as we go forward with the project. But one thing, again, that I sometimes forget to do is to update the README. So I'm going to just see if there's a version of Node that's mentioned in any of these README files. And if there is, I'm going to make sure that we're referencing the right one. Right, so this one was, I'm just going to say .x.x LTS. So that should be the last change that we need, but I'm going to wait and make sure that that build actually does work when we're targeting node 16. So heading back over to that pull request that we were just reviewing, there should be a check that's running. And you can see now it's building it on 16.x, not 12.x like it was before. No accessibility violations, so those tests passed. And now it's doing that final build. So this looks like it's good. And that should be all we need to do to wrap up this PR. Put that up to the pull request. I think that should be the last thing we need to do for that one. And I can't remember if we had I don't think we had an issue here about updating the GitHub action to node 16, so I don't have anything that I need to reference there. But I can probably close this one off, at least for now, as part of this pull request. So that is issue number 110. That pull request that's here. Did I push my change to the README file? I did. Okay, so this resolves number 110. When is it? Strange. Is that going to reference the right one? Yes. Okay, so this updates the client app GitHub action target main branch. It updates GitHub action use node 16, and it runs end-to-end tests with every PR build. Fantastic. Managed to get a couple big updates in there, updating the client app or the API to .NET 6, also the admin app to .NET 6. We've got the client app updated to node 16, and we have those end-to-end tests running with that feedback of being able to upload the screenshots when there's a failure. That's really key, I find, if you're integrating running end-to-end tests as part of your workflows, is that you need a good way to go in there and actually investigate the errors that are happening. You don't want to be wasting time trying to reproduce it locally and maybe not being able to reproduce it locally and just generally unsure of why your actions are failing, why your workflow is failing. So that's where it's definitely nice to have those screenshots uploaded. You can actually probably won't do it for this project, but Playwright's got some really interesting stuff in there where you can even do recordings. So you can get video recordings of the test. Instead of just a screenshot, you can get like a full playback video recording of what happened, which is pretty cool. That probably would take up a lot of space if you started uploading that with every build, but it's something that we can consider in the future if we need it. And there we go. That succeeded. So it looks like we're in a good place. We're going to look to continue to extend that now that we have that built into the workflow, and try to get a few more end-to-end tests written as part of our kind of base thing that gets tested every time there's a PR. I'd like to have at a minimum like a very simple smoke test that allows us to log in as a test user and view some basic information and maybe do like the basic actions that you would expect a user to be able to do. And then we can kind of build it up from there. There's lots of different APIs around Playwright for simulating the network too. So we might not necessarily need to have the API running. We could actually just stub out the API and see how test how the application reacts based on what the API is returning. So one of those scenarios that somebody asked about earlier is like, what if the network's down, or what if you have a network connection but the cloud is down? We could actually test some of those scenarios using Playwright quite easily by intercepting those network requests and injecting the types of failures that we want to inject, and then validating that the UI and the application is behaving the way we expect it to. For example, loading data from a local cache. So, lots of great options there that I'm looking forward to exploring with Playwright. And I keep losing my window where the Playwright documentation was. But yeah, there's lots of great stuff in here. I'm also going to look into those test reporters, see what I need to do to get that working. I suspect there's just an npm package that I need to reference that maybe I don't have referenced. But there's really cool stuff around like generating tests and having it record you actually running through the UI and running through scenarios. It's, as I said, it's something I've been exploring a little bit too. So if you head over to this YouTube channel where we're also streaming today, I have a playlist here with some different, where I'm exploring different features of Playwright, and talks about some of these things that we talked about today, like accessibility testing with Playwright and using the Playwright inspector and using the network interceptor, all those different lovely features that exist in it. So I'll just drop that into the chat here, and you can check that out if you're interested in learning a bit more about Playwright. And I think that we're almost ready to pass things off to Carrie, who is Coding Bandit, I believe, on Twitch. But once I hear from Carrie that she's ready, we will pass things over to her for the next portion of the stream today. Thank you so much for joining. If you're interested in helping out and contributing on the 2weeksReady project, just head on over to that GitHub repo, HTBox/2weeksready, and take a look at the issues. We are going to keep working on this issue list. We have some new features that were added today. We're going to spec those out a little more, and just watch out for that good first issue tag for good places to get started in helping out with the project. And we are going to pass things over to Carrie. Thanks so much for joining. Over to you, Carrie.